Last night, Republicans suffered yet more electoral bad news because in a New York special election, Democrats reclaimed a congressional seat that had been previously occupied by disgraced Republican Congressman George Santos, further shrinking the razor-thin Republican House majority. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert buttons before you go. I'd greatly appreciate it. All right, friends, we have several clips to play in this video, but as a reminder, I know I look and sound a bit rough. I am sick. I am recovering. I hope to be better soon, so please bear with me. But folks, this is fantastic freaking news for the Democratic Party and for the American people as a whole, and once again demonstrates that the MAGA Republican agenda, such as it is wildly unpopular and out of step with the American people, and it's yet another major electoral victory for the Democratic Party and is hopefully some indicator of what is to come ahead of the 2024 election, fingers crossed. I want to play a clip of the victorious Democratic Congressman, Tom Suozzi. This is what he had to say.
Let's send a message to our friends running the Congress these days. Stop running around for Trump and start running the country.
That's a great message. That's very succinct. That was from his victory speech, and it's great wisdom for the Republican Party, but the Republican Party really isn't inclined to listen to wisdom. As a matter of fact, this is what Republican Speaker Mike Johnson had to say in the aftermath of Tom Suozzi's victory and his party's defeat. He was asked effectively about a change in strategy from the current MAGA Republican tactics to something more reasonable. This is what Mike Johnson had to say.
You effectively give Democrats something to campaign on.
No, not at all. Look, the American people are with us on this issue. I mean, they are with us because they understand you have to actually solve the problem. And the product that was produced by the Senate did not solve the problem. You've all heard us hammer over and over H.R. 2, right? That was our signature piece of legislation that we passed many, many months ago, last year. And the reason that all those components are important, again, is because they have to fit together. That's got to solve the problem. You have to address all of them. The Senate bill didn't do that, and that's why it was rejected.
So specifically, they're asking about how Tom Suozzi ran relatively conservative on the border in terms of his messaging, even though that he was a Democrat. And the fact of the matter is he won the race. So the question is, okay, well, listen, you've been engaged in this ridiculous brinkmanship and gamesmanship with the American people and the Democratic Party on this issue. So maybe, given that this signature issue was not enough to defeat the Democrats in a seat that you all had previously occupied, maybe you should adopt a different strategy. But no, Mike Johnson says the American people are truly with us. Simon Rosenberg, a Democratic strategist, a guy who is the eternal optimist, he predicted that the 2022 midterms would not, in fact, be a red wave, and that has catapulted him back into prominence. This is how he described Tom Suozzi's victory, and he makes mention specifically of Mike Johnson, the guy we just saw, of his job performance in managing all this.
Let me say three quick things, and just responding to your question first. One is, yeah, I mean, look, the basic dynamic of this election, the basic where we are, is that Joe Biden is a good president. The country is far better off today. The Democratic Party is strong in winning elections all across the country. And they have Trump, who's the most unfit guy to run for president in all of American history. And we should be very optimistic about that. And what we heard tonight was we litigated some of the tough issues. You know, this was an election that was hard fought, where Republicans, continued to make tough arguments against the Democrats that we've been told by many people would take us out and be debilitating, and that we weren't going to be able to overcome. And here's Suozzi tonight, winning in a district that we lost by 8 points, now by over 10 points. It's an enormous victory. Point two is that the Republicans in the House have to recognize that what they're doing is they're running towards a failed politics right now. Everything they've done in the last few weeks, they're running faster and faster, harder and harder into MAGA. MAGA is a failed politics. It lost in 2018, it lost in 2020, it lost in 2023, 22, lost in 2023, and it's losing now again in 2024. The speaker is blowing it, and he's making huge mistakes, not just for the country, but for his party.
And that's great for Democrats, again, at least in terms of the politics of it. And he has every opportunity, Mike Johnson, to do something different. But of course, he's too much of a coward and a cultist to do anything different. And Donald Trump is the true leader of the Republican Party, not Mike Johnson. And even though Mike Johnson is probably much smarter than Trump, he doesn't have the sheer force of personality. So this is the devil's bargain that Republicans have made. And we're seeing that it bears terrible, rotten fruit for them electorally. Dana Bash, CNN, this is what she had to say. Apparently, she was on the ground in New York Congressional District 3, and she spoke with voters regarding this election and specifically the border. And this is what Republican voters had to say.
I heard from voters that they were these are obviously very well-informed voters, right, but they were at the polling station. They were voting early. And several of them said to me that they don't want to vote for the Republican because it's clearly impossible to get a solution on the issue of immigration. They said the border problem, the immigration issue, the migrant issue in their district was the top issue for them. And that the fact that Republicans killed that bipartisan deal put them over the edge to vote for Tom Suozzi.
So, folks, this is important. Now, again, this is anecdotal, right? Dana Bash is referring to relatively informed Republican voters, but there is serious potential there for the Democratic Party, their surrogates, and, really just commentators in general, if we seize this opportunity relentlessly, because what that means is Republicans in a district that had been previously controlled by Republicans on a matter that the Republican voters in question say is their top priority, the border, which Republicans in general enjoy a colossal polling advantage on. They voted for the Democrats because they were made aware of the fact that Democrats proposed a relatively Republican-friendly conservative border bill, and Republicans, for sheer politics, killed it. So, folks, that right there is proof that there is something there if we just seize the moment. A Republican Congressman, Mike Waltz, was asked about this by Fox News, saying, listen, okay, you guys had this issue front and center and you lost. What's up with that?
The New York special election that took place yesterday, the Democrat won, even though the Republican was pushing the immigration issue front and center. Why do you think that happened?
Well, I think when we unpack that, that's going to have a lot more to do with mail-in ballots and with early voting and a storm happening the day of voting where most of our voters vote. So I think that's going to be more of a turnout story than it is an issue story. But the Democrat was talking about the border, too. Everybody's talking about the border.
So again, notice how he immediately dismisses the possibility out of hand or the moment for introspection. Like maybe there is a risk here that you're overplaying your hand. Maybe it's possible for Democrats to successfully use the fact that you all deliberately screwed a bipartisan border deal. Maybe the fact that they can use that to the Democrats' advantage is not something that you're really considering, and he won't consider. He says it's a turnout issue, which, by the way, if Republicans would embrace alternative forms of voting besides in-person same-day voting, like mail-in absentee ballots, which, again, they don't inherently work for just Democrats. Republicans can and should avail themselves of the same options too, but they don't. This is, again, the result of the devil's bargain. Kellyanne Conway, she is the most effective Trump propagandist. She is so quick on her feet. She is a terrible, terrible person. She's the one who invented alternate facts. This is what she had to say on the messaging, and she's actually trying to give Republicans advice on how to deal with not only the immigration and border issue, but also abortion.
Suozzi, instead of lying like every other Democrat seems to be doing these days, Mayorkas is doing a great job. There's no crisis at the border. The borders are, Kamala's wonderful. Biden's right. What did he do? He said, I better go against my party on the border. And he did it. Paid advertising, mailers, press conferences, public appeals. So he has shown the Democrats how to run on the border. I think the Republicans should do the same thing with abortion. Instead of being ostriches and pretending with their head in the sand, they should be peacocks and say, look, this is what it means to be pro-life.
So listen, even Kellyanne Conway with her dishonest characterization thing, Democrats aren't lying about the border. The fact of the matter is that Tom Suozzi is not really out of pace with the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party offered a relatively conservative border bill. And the fact of the matter is that by Republicans' own metrics, President Biden is indeed handling the southern border relatively well, given the resources that he has at his disposal. The fact that Republicans in Congress are not inclined to give him more resources because they want to use it as a wedge issue, right? He's doing the best that he has with the situation at his disposal, even though we need comprehensive and humane and progressive immigration reform, which Republicans oppose. But she's basically saying in her own roundabout way, she's like, guys, Democrats have taken this losing issue, turned it into a winner. Republicans need to do the same thing with abortion if they hope to win elections, but they failed to do so time and time and time again because I would argue the Republican position on abortion is inherently unpopular and inhumane, and there's no amount of lipstick you can put on that particular pig to make it attractive to people. The last thing I want to show you is Manu Raju from CNN interviewing really upset Republicans in the aftermath of this special election in which they lost another seat. This is Manu Raju interviewing Byron Donalds, who's one of the worst MAGA Republicans, and a couple of others.
If he was found guilty, then yeah, he should remove himself from Congress. And if he wouldn't remove himself, then the chamber would have a responsibility to do that. But to preempt that, to score political points, was stupid.
But by the way, they're referring to the fact that they expelled George Santos, the previous occupant of the district that the Democrats just won.
A lot of Republicans here are already blaming you guys for pushing out George Santos. What do you say to them?
There are a lot of decisions that have occurred these last couple of months that have shrunk the majority. Perhaps George Santos, being honest, would have kept one more seat here in Congress.
Republicans have got to take advantage of early voting. We can't start so far behind.
Trump is the one who has criticized early voting. I mean, are you guys still feeling the ramifications of all that?
Well, I think the president understands what we're saying. There's a difference between mail ballots and in person, and these are certainly conversations we'll have with the president.
I mean, you can see, he was absolutely correct in the first part that if Republicans want to win elections, one of the things they should do is avail themselves of all legal options, right? And probably try to expand those legal options. But again, they're just so wrapped up in the idea that they can't win elections if you maximize eligible voter turnout. And that's probably true, right? Typically speaking, they lose elections when voter eligibility is maximized. But on the other hand, in the 2022 midterms, more people cast ballots for Republicans than Democrats. So it's not set in stone. Maybe if Republicans had a popular, reasonable agenda with a defensible record, and then they maximize eligible voter turnout the way any civic-minded person would do, maybe they would still be able to win elections. But here's the thing. They won't do it because they can't untangle themselves from Donald Trump. And even, quite frankly, before Trump, the Republican agenda and the Republican record was objectively terrible, right? So in order for them to win elections, they need to avail themselves of more options. And you can see it on his face when Manu Raju points out, well, you would be effectively going against Donald Trump because Donald Trump has been talking smack about mail-in and absentee ballots. And you can see the fear. I think the president, he kind of like understands. No, you just don't want to admit the fact that Trump's advice and strategies were objectively terrible because he's a moron who should be mocked and belittled at every opportunity. And instead, you've anointed him as your cult leader. So this is great. This is phenomenal news. Again, that razor-thin Republican majority in the House is shrinking. They still enjoy a majority, but it's unruly, it's incompetent, it's dysfunctional. And Democrats have an opportunity here to learn from Tom Suozzi as much as we can when and where it's convenient in the specific district. And we can not only potentially reclaim the House, which is very, very probable. I would say that at least the current indications favor Democrats by far over the Republicans. Hopefully we can maintain our edge in the Senate at least. That's going to be a lot harder. And retain the White House, then we'll have an opportunity to have reunified government and really pass meaningful legislation which would benefit the American people and also keep these Republicans in check. But it doesn't seem like there's much introspection coming from this party. It seems like they're going to double down on the stupidity and dysfunction which got them here in the first place. And while that might be dangerous for the country in a certain respect, it's certainly good news for Democrats. So let me know what you think in the comments.